Hello, my name is Mark Schneider. Today we're going to go over the basic hookup of a standard mini system. We're going to go through every aspect from unpacking to putting the components in their various places to connection to power up. Okay, let's get started. When your system first arrives, it'll come in a large pallet like this. Obviously it's going to be in your parking lot of your store and you're going to need to get it inside. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to unpack it. We're going to go through the various steps of getting it into your store. First thing you want to do is you have these bandings on here. You can use some tin snips, or if you have some wire cutters, that's what usually I use. Whenever you cut these, you always want to make sure that you have the strap secure so it doesn't flop open and hit you in the head or anything like that. Once you have the wrapping off, we can go ahead and get to the server, but for now let's go ahead and take off the various items on the pallet here. Sometimes there'll be various pieces used for other parts of the system, but typically you're going to have your processing computer, your streaming computer, your computer monitor, and your power supply. The power supply, typically it's going to be on the bottom, and it's pretty heavy. I would recommend getting two people to help you. But just right now, let's go ahead and take the items off and get ready to pull the server off. Now when you need to remove the box from the server rack, the easiest way to do that is just lift it right over the top. Once you get the box off, you'll see a few more items. Here we have a management computer, streaming computer, we have the power file. Again, just cut the banding. Get the shrink wrap off of there, and go ahead and unload these items off of here. Now we're ready just to lift it right off the pallet. Luckily it's low enough to slide through any door, so all we're going to do is pull it off the pallet and roll it into your building. You just keep going. Now we're just going to go ahead and load up the rack with the various parts. We're going to start with the bottom. The power supply is going to go in the middle. Processing and streaming computers are going to go on either side. We're going to set up a power file here, monitor here, and computer up top. So now we're just going to unbox these items and put them in place. Now we need to put the feet on this power supply. Granted, the one we sent you might be a little different. We do change models from time to time, but this one here, the feet are going to mount to the bottom. We can tell this is the bottom because we put this face on here. So the feet on this one just lay upside down right on top here, and you can see the holes line up. And then they give you a little bag of screws here. Just go ahead and fasten it down. Now we're just going to flip it over, push the power cord through the back, and slide it on the shelf. Cover plate just snaps right on the front. Now we move on to the computers. With the mini systems, there's actually only three computers you're going to need: a management computer, a streaming computer, and a processing computer. They will be labeled. The processing and the streaming computers basically look the same except for the label. Once I unpack these, I'm going to put the processing computer on the right side of the rack, and I'm going to put the streaming computer on the left side of the rack. It's necessary because there are certain connections that are pre-wired into the rack that you want to make sure they fit into the right computer. So right now I'm just going to unbox these computers and put them into place. Another item we can unbox now is the management computer. This computer is going to go onto the top shelf of the server. Now we're going to put the power file onto the server shelf here. One thing I would say about this unit is just be a little extra careful with it. It's one of the most expensive units in the system. We don't want to obviously drop it or mishandle it. The last few items we have are the keyboard, the mouse, and the monitor. Keyboard is going to end up on the front here, mouse is going to go along the side, and monitor is just going to go up on this shelf here. Now we just go ahead and put the keyboard and the mouse, take it out of the box, run the cables along the right side of the power file. Now we're going to spin it around and hook up all the different connections. Let's go ahead and start with the top of the rack. This is our management computer on top here. There are some cables that are zip tied. One rule of thumb, any zip ties you see that have this extra piece on there typically needs to be removed. The rest of them, if they're trimmed down, that's just part of the rack. So let's go through these wires here. The closest one we have to the edge is a standard power cord wire that's going to plug right in here. Now we have what's called a KVM cable. This is for your monitor and your keyboard, so this is going to plug in right here in the middle. Just keep in mind that most of these computers, there's only one place where these will connect, and a lot of them are color coded, so it's much easier for you. Then we have this green and purple wire. This is for your mouse and your keyboard. They just plug in on the end here. This cable here is called a firewire cable. This is going to go on the far side. On this computer there's 3 connections. It doesn't matter which one you put it in. They all work the same. And we have 2 left. This yellow one is an Ethernet wire. There's only one jack for it, and that's right up here. This last cable connects to the relay box that's connected to the power file, and that one goes right here in the center. And with all these, let's just go ahead and twist on the little nuts here to make sure they're secured in place. Now we move down a little bit and we get to the back of the computer monitor and the modem. The modem doesn't really need any connections, everything's already hooked up for you. Just want to point out the 2 jacks we have here. If you hook it up to your store phone line, you're going to want to connect to this far jack, and that's going to plug into your wall. If you wanted to plug in a phone, you could plug that in here. Unfortunately, it's not labeled on the top or the back, it's labeled underneath. So just make sure you always use this jack when you're plugging in your phone line to your building. On this shelf, all we're going to do is we're going to cut this zip tie here. There's a power cord that's going to plug right in here. Then we're going to move down to the power file. Now the back of the power file, we have a couple connections that we need to hook up here. Let's start with this side. There's a few different power cords we have. One of the power cords is going to be tied up with this male connection, and these 2 are going to connect into this power file box. So we're going to put these right in here. This extra cable on the side is going to connect directly to the power. Over on the other side here, we have a few other connections. This is our fire wire. Again, this can go into any one of these 3 jacks. On the other side of this power file control box, there is one more connection we need to hook up. And this cable is just going to slide right in here. And then you want to go ahead and secure it with these little thumb screws. The computer monitor cable is going to plug into the back of the KVM switch, but we're going to go ahead and tie up the wires here to keep it out of the way. We have these little snaps. Just drop the cable in, push down the little cable clip. Now the end of this connection is going to plug in on this far side. This KVM says console. It could say something else, but typically it's going to be over to the far side, and it's going to look a little different than the rest of them. The only other connections we have on this KVM is the keyboard and mouse that we hooked up to the front, and they have these connections here. They do need to plug into the front of the KVM here. We don't really have a cable trough or anything like that, so you can either wrap it around the KVM or use a zip tie later. On the back of the power supply, we're only going to plug in the power cords that run the various computers, but there is also a communication cable, and that goes right here in the center. Again, we're just going to push it in and tighten up the thumb screws. I'm going to go over here and connect the streaming computer first, over on the left. Here's some more ties we need to cut off. And we'll go through these wires one at a time. We have the KVM wire, same as the computer up top. That's going to connect right here. Again, we'll have the mouse and keyboard wires. We have a power cord is going to plug in up top here. As for these green and yellow Ethernet wires, it is critical that these go into the right jacks. The yellow one is going to connect into this one on the bottom here. Now the green one is going to plug into this top jack. You'll notice there's two of them right next to each other. They look exactly the same, but it is critical that it goes into this top jack, the one closest to the KVM connection. There should be nothing into this jack right here. Now we're going to hook up the connections to the processing computer. It's pretty much the same as the streaming computer, except we have just a couple extra wires. Let's straighten these out here. So let's start with the power cord. That's just going to go up top. Now we have this extra cable here. This one connects to the modem, and that's going to plug in right here. And we have the same KVM switch cable. Plugs in there. Just so you understand the KVM switch, it's basically a unit that allows you to switch between your various computers while looking at the same computer screen and using the same keyboard and mouse. Yeah, let's give me some problems. Now we have the same yellow and green Ethernet cables. They're going to plug in the same way as the streaming computer. Yellow wire goes on the bottom, and the green wire is going to go on top. Again, we want to make sure we're not using this connection. We're only using this one up here. Let's go ahead and plug in the various power cords into the power supply right now. Just going to cut these ties down here. Loosen up all these wires. There's no real set standard where these need to go. We just go by length. All the plugs are basically the same. We have a couple switches on the front of the system. That's where these power cords are going to come from. These were probably tied up to the front post when you first got it. So as you can see here, I need to move these cables around to make sure they fit. If you purchase quad with the system, you're going to have 4 of these quad STBs, and these are just going to lay on the back of the shelf here. As you can see, they're labeled A, B, C, and D. We're just going to lay those right here. And we have a couple cables we need to connect to them. Let's start with the gray Ethernet cables. Now these, from a technical standpoint, it doesn't matter where they're connected to. They'll all work the same. But they are labeled, and that's mostly just because of the length of the cable. We want to make sure that they reach properly. So we have A, B, C, and D. Now we have these small power cords that we need to connect, and they're labeled for you also. A, B, C, and D. And with these, honestly, it doesn't matter which one goes where. If they're not labeled, it's fine. They can just be plugged in anyway. These are the only ones that are somewhat important. These are actually the video outputs for the quad splitter, so these you want to make sure they go into the right jack. So this is A. We're going to put that into the A STB, and it plugs into the video jack, which is the yellow connection here on the bottom. And we're just going to do the same all the way across the board, A, B, C, D. And after you have that connected, that's pretty much everything you have to do on the back of the rack. So now that we have everything connected, you can pretty much plug in the power. The only note I would like to make is if for some reason we loaded all the discs for you and we shipped them to you, you would want to disconnect the firewire from the power file before you plug the power in. Once you do that, you can do a mass load of all the discs, and then you can go ahead and plug the firewire back in. As of the time of this video, we are no longer preloading discs, so the chances are probably pretty slim. So let's go ahead and plug it in right now. Once we have the unit plugged into the wall, we're going to go ahead and turn the power supply on. There's a small button right on the front here. We're just going to press that. Once you do that, you might hear a computer start up. You might hear for some fans going, something like that. Some things will turn on by themselves, some things won't. In this instance, the power file was left on, so it's going to automatically power on. If it's not on, all you're going to do is hit the little power button on the side here. When you turn on the computers, it is important to turn them on in a certain order. The processing computer is the first computer you want to turn on, and there's a power switch right here. Just going to hit the button, it's going to start up. Keep in mind the computer we send you might be a little different, but there'll be a universal power button on the front. So we turn that one on, we wait about 20-30 seconds, and then we can go ahead and turn on the streaming computer. The streaming computer is basically set up the same way. We just have another power button on the side here. That unit will now start up. Now we'll just go up here, and we're going to turn on the management computer. On this computer, there's just a button over here on the left. Press that, it'll start up. Now you might see some different screens on the computer screen. What basically happens is the first computer that turns on, the KVM switches to that unit. So once you get the system completely booted up, you can just switch over to the management computer, and you do that by pressing numlocks twice and hitting F1, but we'll go into more detail on that on the next video. When you're ready to hook up your booth cables, you'll notice you'll have two different types of ends. This end, the BNC and the Ethernet cable are the same length, and on this end, the Ethernet cable is a little extra long. This is the side that you're going to connect to the digital system, and this is the side that you're going to connect to the booth. Now when you go to unroll these cables, it's very, very important that you would unroll them just like a garden hose would be coming off a reel. This way you don't have any kinks in the cable, comes off smoothly, and everything works fine. If you were to pull the cables apart like this, you're going to end up with a lot of twisted corners and everything, which can cause problems. If you get a really tight twist like this and you put a little tension on it, you can actually break the video wire in there, and then you're climbing through an attic replacing wires at 3 in the morning, something you don't want to do. So let's go ahead and unroll the cable, and I'll show you where they connect to the system. Where you run the cables is just kind of your own personal preference. If you want to keep it as neat and clean as possible, I suggest you bring it in from the back and then connect it to the front. What you can do is just push the Ethernet wire and the BNC through the top of the KVM switch. And we're going to run the Ethernet wire onto the far right side, right below the quad splitter. Now we're going to connect this BNC to the back of the quad splitter, and we're going to, if you'll notice there's some numbers on here, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. We want to make sure you get the right booth number to the right connector. Technically it'll work the same, but this way if you ever have a video problem, you know where to look. Once you have the cable pushed through the front, you're going to see two switches. The bottom switch you're never going to plug anything into. We're going to plug your boost into this top switch. You'll see they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The cable is just going to plug into the front. Again, from a technical standpoint, it doesn't matter which jack it goes in. They're all going to work the same. But this way, if you ever have a problem with the cable, you know which booth it goes to.